The wager the champagne bubbles caught the city lights like trapped stars, each glass worth more than most people made in a week. Marcus Sterling stood at the edge of his penthouse terrace, watching the ants below navigate their mundane lives, while he floated 40 stories above their struggles. At 28, he'd built an empire on apps that promised connection but delivered isolation, each download padding his billion-dollar fortune. "You're getting soft, Sterling," Devin Hayes called from across the terrace, his voice cutting through the ambient music and laughter. Devin's tech company had crashed spectacularly last year, leaving him bitter and hungry for chaos. "Remember when you had balls?" Marcus turned, his designer suit catching the wind. The party was in full swing. Influencers, tech moguls, and trust. Fund babies, all pretending their lives had meaning. "Soft? I just bought a competitor this morning before breakfast. The business balls don't count." Devin swirled his whiskey, ice clinking against crystal. "I'm talking about real risk, real content. When's the last time you did something that actually mattered to your followers?" Jasper Knox, Marcus's social media manager, looked up from his phone, where he'd been monitoring engagement rates. "He's got a point, boss. Your last 3 posts barely hit 10 million views. The algorithm's hungry for something raw." Marcus felt the familiar itch, the need to prove himself, to dominate, to win. It had driven him since childhood, when his father's bankruptcy had taught him that weakness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Devin's smile was sharp as broken glass. "There's a homeless woman down by the subway entrance. Saw her on my way up. Filthy, broken, perfect for content." He leaned closer, his breath reeking of expensive alcohol and cheap intentions. "Clean her up. Film it. Show the world what real charity looks like." The idea was repulsive, brilliant, and exactly the kind of stunt that would break the internet. Marcus's followers craved authenticity, and what could be more authentic than transforming someone's life? The optics were perfect. Billionaire saves homeless woman, goes viral, stock prices soar. "That's disgusting," said a voice behind them. They turned to see a woman in a red dress, her face flushed with indignation. "You're talking about a human being. We're talking about helping someone," Marcus replied smoothly, already selling himself on the idea. "What's more human than that?" The woman shook her head and walked away, but Marcus had already forgotten her. The bet was taking shape, crystallizing into something he could execute. Devin was right. He had gotten soft, comfortable. This would remind everyone why Marcus Sterling was untouchable. 10 million says you won't do it," Devin challenged, extending his hand. Marcus didn't hesitate. The handshake was firm, sealing a deal that would change everything. "Jasper, get the cameras ready. We're going hunting." 20 minutes later, they found her. She was curled against the subway entrance like a discarded coat, her dark hair matted, but not yet gray, suggesting she hadn't been on the streets long. Her clothes were torn but clean, indicating a pride that poverty hadn't yet stolen. Even sleeping, she clutched a violin case like a lifeline. "Perfect," Devin whispered, already framing shots with his phone. Marcus studied her face, noting the sharp cheekbones that spoke of recent hunger rather than chronic starvation. Something about her stillness unsettled him. She wasn't unconscious or drugged, just deeply asleep in the way of someone who'd learned to rest anywhere, ma'am. Marcus called softly. She opened her eyes immediately, alert and wary. They were brown, almost amber, and held an intelligence that caught him off guard. She didn't speak, just watched him with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that strangers brought trouble. "I'm Marcus Sterling," he said, crouching down to her level. "I'd like to help you." Her laugh was bitter but musical. "Help costs money I don't have." "No cost, just a chance to get clean, get warm, get fed." He gestured to the cameras. "Filming something about helping people, you'd be compensated, of course." She studied his face, then the cameras, then back to his face. "Compensated how? A warm place to stay tonight? Hot meal, clean clothes, $1,000 cash?" For a moment, he saw her mask slip, revealing a desperation that made his chest tight. Then it was back in place, that careful dignity that seemed unbreakable. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rose," she said simply. "Rose Chen." Rose. He tested the name, finding it suited her somehow. "You let me help you?" She was quiet for a long moment, weighing options he couldn't see. Finally, she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Okay." As she gathered her violin case and stood, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that would haunt him later. Not gratitude, but a sad understanding that she was about to become someone's entertainment. She knew exactly what this was, and she was choosing it anyway. The cameras rolled, capturing what they thought was the beginning of a feel-good story. None of them realized they were documenting the first crack in Marcus Sterling's carefully constructed world. The wager: the champagne bubbles caught the city lights like trapped stars, each glass worth more than most people made in a week. Marcus Sterling stood at the edge of his penthouse terrace, watching the ants below navigate their mundane lives, while he floated 40 stories above their struggles. At 28, he'd built an empire on apps that promised connection but delivered isolation. Each download padding his billion-dollar fortune. "You're getting soft, Sterling," Devin Hayes called from across the terrace, his voice cutting through the ambient music and laughter. Devin's tech company had crashed spectacularly last year, leaving him bitter and hungry for chaos. "Remember when you had balls?" Marcus turned, his designer suit catching the wind. The party was in full swing. Influencers, tech moguls, and trust. Fund babies, all pretending their lives had meaning. "Soft?" "I just bought a competitor this morning before breakfast. The business balls don't count." Devin swirled his whiskey, ice clinking against crystal. "I'm talking about real risk. Real content. When's the last time you did something that actually mattered to your followers?" Jasper Knox, Marcus's social media manager, looked up from his phone, where he'd been monitoring engagement rates. "He's got a point, boss. Your last 3 posts barely hit 10 million views. The algorithm's hungry for something raw." Marcus felt the familiar itch, the need to prove himself, to dominate, to win. It had driven him since childhood, when his father's bankruptcy had taught him that weakness was a luxury he couldn't afford. Devin's smile was sharp as broken glass. "There's a homeless woman down by the subway entrance. Saw her on my way up. Filthy, broken, perfect for content." He leaned closer, his breath reeking of expensive alcohol and cheap intentions. "Clean her up. Film it. Show the world what real charity looks like." The idea was repulsive, brilliant, and exactly the kind of stunt that would break the internet. Marcus's followers craved authenticity, and what could be more authentic than transforming someone's life? The optics were perfect: billionaire saves homeless woman, goes viral, stock prices soar. "That's disgusting," said a voice behind them. They turned to see a woman in a red dress, her face flushed with indignation. "You're talking about a human being. We're talking about helping someone," Marcus replied smoothly, already selling himself on the idea. "What's more human than that?" The woman shook her head and walked away, but Marcus had already forgotten her. The bet was taking shape, crystallizing into something he could execute. Devin was right. He had gotten soft, comfortable. This would remind everyone why Marcus Sterling was untouchable. 10 million says you won't do it," Devin challenged, extending his hand. Marcus didn't hesitate. The handshake was firm, sealing a deal that would change everything. "Jasper, get the cameras ready. We're going hunting." 20 minutes later, they found her. She was curled against the subway entrance like a discarded coat, her dark hair matted, but not yet gray, suggesting she hadn't been on the streets long. Her clothes were torn but clean, indicating a pride that poverty hadn't yet stolen. Even sleeping, she clutched a violin case like a lifeline. "Perfect," Devin whispered, already framing shots with his phone. Marcus studied her face, noting the sharp cheekbones that spoke of recent hunger rather than chronic starvation. Something about her stillness unsettled him. She wasn't unconscious or drugged, just deeply asleep in the way of someone who'd learned to rest anywhere, ma'am. Marcus called softly. She opened her eyes immediately, alert and wary. They were brown, almost amber, and held an intelligence that caught him off guard. She didn't speak, just watched him with the careful attention of someone who'd learned that strangers brought trouble. I'm Marcus Sterling, he said, crouching down to her level. I'd like to help you. Her laugh was bitter but musical. Help costs money I don't have. No cost, just a chance to get clean, get warm, get fed. He gestured to the cameras. Filming something about helping people, you'd be compensated, of course. She studied his face, then the cameras, then back to his face. Compensated how? A warm place to stay tonight? Hot meal, clean clothes, $1,000 cash? For a moment, he saw her mask slip, revealing a desperation that made his chest tight. Then it was back in place, that careful dignity that seemed unbreakable. What's your name? He asked. Rose, she said simply. Rose Chen. Rose. He tested the name, finding it suited her somehow. You let me help you? She was quiet for a long moment, weighing options he couldn't see. Finally, she nodded once, sharp and decisive. Okay. As she gathered her violin case and stood, Marcus caught a glimpse of something that would haunt him later. Not gratitude, but a sad understanding that she was about to become someone's entertainment. She knew exactly what this was, and she was choosing it anyway. The cameras rolled, capturing what they thought was the beginning of a feel-good story. None of them realized they were documenting the first crack in Marcus Sterling's carefully constructed world. Viral poison. Marcus woke to the sound of his phone exploding with notifications. The video had gone live at midnight, and by dawn it had already hit 50 million views. He reached for his coffee, expecting the usual flood of praise and engagement. But his smile died when he read the first comment. This is disgusting. You literally exploited a homeless woman for views. Sentiment was echoed thousands of times below. Marcus scrolled faster, his stomach dropping with each response. The internet had turned his act of charity into a symbol of everything wrong with wealth inequality. Hashtag exploitation not charity was trending worldwide. Sir Nina appeared in the doorway, her face tight with concern. There are reporters downstairs, quite a few of them. Marcus looked toward the guest room where Rose had spent the night. Is she awake? She left an hour ago, said she had somewhere to be. The abandonment stung more than Marcus expected. He'd hoped to control the narrative, maybe do a follow-up video. Instead, Rose had vanished like morning mist, leaving him to face the storm alone. His phone rang. Benjamin Foster, his lawyer. Marcus, we need to talk now. It's just social media noise, Ben. It'll die down. 3 major sponsors have already pulled out. The board is calling an emergency meeting. This isn't noise, it's a Category 5 hurricane, and you're standing in the eye. Marcus ended the call and turned on the news. Victoria Reeves, an investigative journalist known for dismantling tech titans, was speaking directly to the camera. With the kind of predatory focus that made billionaires sweat. The woman in Marcus Sterling's video isn't just any homeless person, Victoria was saying. Our research has identified her as Rosalie Chen, a former Juilliard student whose promising career was destroyed by personal tragedy. This isn't charity, it's exploitation of someone's society has already failed. The screen filled with images. Marcus had never seen Rose at 17, radiant in a concert gown, violin raised in triumph. Rose at her parents' funeral, small and broken in black. Rose's scholarship photo, full of hope and possibility. Miss Chen was orphaned at 16, Victoria continued. Despite a full scholarship to one of the world's most prestigious music schools, she was forced to drop out due to financial hardship. She's been homeless for 8 months. Not because of addiction or mental illness, but because our system failed. A brilliant young woman when she needed help most. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. He'd known Rose was educated, talented, but seeing her past laid bare made his stunt feel infinitely more cruel. He'd turned a woman's tragedy into content. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The coffee shop on 5th and Main. 1 hour. Come alone. Our Marcus arrived to find Rose sitting in the corner booth, her violin case beside her. She looked smaller in daylight, wearing the same clothes Nina had given her, but somehow diminished. The cafe was nearly empty, but she kept glancing at the windows as if expecting cameras. You came, she said without looking up. I had to. Rose, About the video, you mean the video where you turned my shower into entertainment for 50 million strangers? Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. I wanted to help. You wanted content. There's a difference. She finally met his eyes, and he saw something there that made his throat tight. Not anger, but disappointment. I knew what I was agreeing to, Marcus. I'm not naive, but I hoped there might be something real in it. There was. Is. The money I promised. Keep it. She pushed an envelope across the table. I don't want your guilt money. Marcus stared at the returned cash, feeling something important slipping away. What do you want? I want to disappear. But your video made that impossible. She pulled out her phone, showing him the screen. Claudia Morgan, my former roommate at Juilliard. She gave Victoria Reeves everything. Photos, interviews, details about my family. She said she wanted to protect me from you. Maybe she did? Maybe. But now I'm not just homeless, I'm famous for being homeless. Do you know what that does to someone? I can't go to my usual places. Can't sleep where I used to sleep. Everyone recognizes me now. The weight of what he'd done began to crush down on Marcus. He'd thought he was giving Rose a platform, but he'd actually stolen her anonymity, the last protection she had. I can fix this, he said desperately. Another video, setting the record straight. More cameras. Rose's laugh was sharp. You still don't get it. I'm not your redemption story, Marcus. I'm a human being who made a mistake trusting you. She stood to leave, but he caught her wrist gently. Please, tell me how to make this right. Rose looked down at his hand, then back at his face. For a moment, her mask slipped, showing the exhaustion and fear beneath. You want to make it right? Stop making it about you. Stop thinking you can fix everything with money and cameras. Stop believing that good intentions excuse bad actions. Pulled free and walked toward the door, then paused. There's a shelter on Maple Street. Gabriel Santos runs it. If you actually want to help people instead of help yourself, go there. But leave your cameras at home. After she left, Marcus sat alone with his coffee and the weight of his choices. His phone kept buzzing with calls from lawyers, publicists, and board members, but he ignored them all. Instead, he found himself Googling Gabriel Santos Maple Street Shelter. The website was simple, basic, focused on function over form. Gabriel Santos was a former social worker who'd opened the shelter 3 years ago with his own savings. No corporate sponsors, no celebrity endorsements. Just a man trying to help people. Society had forgotten Marcus drove there without thinking, pulled by something he couldn't name. The building was small, clean, but obviously operating on a shoestring. Budget. A sign by the door read, "Everyone deserves dignity." Gabriel Santos was a man in his 40s with kind eyes and calloused hands. He looked up when Marcus entered, recognition flickering across his face. "Mr. Sterling, I was wondering when you'd show up." "You were," Rose said you might. "She also said you'd probably bring cameras." Gabriel looked around the empty space behind. "Marcus, glad to see she was wrong about that. She's here. She volunteers sometimes, helps with music therapy for the kids." Gabriel studied Marcus's face. "You hurt her, you know. More than you probably realize." "I know. I want to make it. Right? Good? Because she's been helping people for months without anyone filming her. Maybe it's time you learned how to do the same." Outside, Marcus's phone was ringing again. His empire was crumbling, his reputation in ruins, his carefully constructed world falling apart. But for the first time in years, he felt like he might be walking toward something real. The video had gone viral, but not in the way he'd intended. Instead of showcasing his charity, it had revealed his cruelty. Instead of building his brand, it had destroyed it. And somehow, in losing everything he thought mattered, Marcus Sterling was about to discover what actually did. Rose was right. He couldn't fix this with money or cameras. But maybe, just maybe, he could fix himself. Falling waters 3 weeks after the video destroyed his reputation, Marcus Sterling stood in the ruins of his empire. The boardroom that had once been his throne room was now a tomb, empty except for Benjamin Foster shuffling papers with the efficiency of an undertaker. "The last of the major investors pulled out this morning," Ben said without looking up. Stock price dropped another 12% overnight. We're looking at a complete restructuring or liquidation. Marcus nodded absently, his attention fixed on the window where he could see protesters gathered below. Their signs read, "Justice for Rose and billionaires are not saviors." He'd become the face of everything wrong with wealth inequality, a symbol of privilege exploiting pain. "Sir." Ben's voice seemed to come from far away. "The board wants your resignation by Friday." "Give it to them today," Marcus said quietly. "Today, Marcus? We can still fight this. Crisis management, image rehabilitation. No." Marcus turned. From the window, something settled in his chest. "I'm done fighting, done managing, done pretending this was anything other than what it was." Ben stared at him as if he'd announced plans to join a monastery. "What will you do?" "I'm going to learn how to help people without cameras." That afternoon, Marcus arrived at the Maple Street shelter with a check for $2 million and a request that made. Gabriel Santos laughed out loud. "You want to volunteer?" Gabriel asked, looking at the check like it might be fake. "Marcus Sterling wants to serve soup and fold laundry?" "I want to learn," Marcus said. "Rose said you'd teach me." "Rose said a lot of things about you. It's not all of them flattering." Gabriel set the check aside. "This is generous, but money's not what we need most." "What do you need?" "Consistency, reliability. Someone who shows up when it's hard, not just when it's convenient." Gabriel studied Marcus's face. "You ever worked with your hands, Mr. Sterling?" "Not in a long time." "Then we'll start there." The next morning, Marcus arrived at 6 a.m. to find Gabriel already organizing donations. The work was mundane, repetitive, and oddly satisfying. Sorting clothes, preparing meals, cleaning bathroom tasks that required no strategy, no vision, just presence. "You're early," a familiar voice said behind him. Marcus turned to find Rose in the doorway, carrying a bag of groceries. She looked healthier than she had at the cafe, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes clean and practical. "I volunteer here now," he said, feeling suddenly awkward. "I know. Gabriel told me." She set down the groceries and began unpacking, then with practiced efficiency. "Why?" "Because you were right about everything." Marcus continued folding blankets, needing something to do with his hands. "I've been thinking about what you said, about good intentions and bad actions." Rose was quiet for a long moment. "And I realized I've been using charity as a performance. It's making it about me instead of the people I claim to help." He looked up from the blankets. "I want to learn how to do it right. That's not something you learn overnight." "I know. I have time now. All the time in the world, actually." Rose's expression softened slightly. "What happened to your company?" "Gone. Liquidated. My board fired me, my investors fled, my reputation's toxic." Marcus found himself smiling. It's liberating, actually. "For the first time in years, I don't have to pretend to be anyone." "Who are you then?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus had built his identity around success, around being untouchable. Now, stripped of everything, he wasn't sure who remained. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'd like to find out." Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into shelter work with the same intensity he'd once applied to building his empire. He learned to cook for 50 people, to change bedding without disturbing sleeping children, to listen without trying to fix everything. The hardest part was the invisibility. At the shelter, he was just Marcus Anat, a billionaire, not a viral sensation, just another volunteer. People knew his story, but they judged him by his actions, not his history. Emma Richardson, the shelter's music therapist, became his unlikely mentor. She was Rose's age, with gentle hands and infinite patience for both traumatized children and humbled tech moguls. "You're trying too hard," she told him one evening as they cleaned up after a music session. Helping people isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up consistently, even when it's boring. "I'm not good at boring," Marcus admitted. "Learn to be. The families here don't need a savior. They need stability, predictability. Someone who'll be here next week and the week after that." The breakthrough came during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half the city. Shelter's generator failed, and Marcus found himself holding flashlights while Gabriel jury-rigged repairs. Around them, families huddled together, children crying, adults trying to stay calm. "Tell them a story," Rose suggested, appearing beside him with a battery-powered lantern. "I don't know any stories." "Then tell them about yourself, something real." Marcus looked at the frightened faces around him and made a choice. 12, he began. "My mother died of cancer. I was so angry I stopped talking for 6 months." The room gradually quieted as people listened. Marcus told them about his father's bankruptcy, about building his first app in a garage, about the loneliness of success. He talked about the video, about his shame, about learning that wealth couldn't buy worth. When he finished, a little girl named Sophie crawled into his lap. "My mommy died too," she whispered. Marcus held her while she cried, feeling something crack open in his chest. This was what he'd been looking for without knowing it. Not admiration or recognition, but connection. Real, messy, human connection. Later, after the power was restored and the families had settled in for the night, Marcus found Rose on the shelter's small rooftop garden. She was tending to vegetables with the same careful attention she gave her. "Violin, thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For making me tell the truth." For the first time in years, I felt like myself. Rose looked up from the tomatoes, dirt under her fingernails, peace in her eyes. "Who is that, do you think?" "Yourself," Marcus considered the question. "Someone who wants to matter, not for what I own or what I've built, but for what I do. How I show up? That's a good start." They worked in companionable silence, two broken people learning to rebuild not just their lives, but their understanding of what made a life worth living. Neither spoke of the growing connection between them, the way their hands brushed when passing tools, the way their conversations stretched longer each day. But Dr. Harrison Webb, the therapist Marcus had started seeing, noticed the change during their weekly sessions. "You're different," Harrison observed. "Calmer, more present." "I'm learning to be useful instead of important," Marcus replied. "There's a difference." And Rose, "How do you feel about her?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Grateful, terrified, changed. He looked up at the doctor. "I think I'm falling in love with her." "And that scares you?" "Everything about her scares me. She sees through all my defenses, knows exactly who I am beneath the money and the reputation. She's brilliant, talented, and completely out of my league. But she's also kind to me, not because of what I can give her, but because of who I'm becoming." Marcus smiled. Maybe that's enough. Outside the therapist's office, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Rose. "Gabriel needs help with dinner prep. You free?" He typed back, "On my way." For the first time in his life, Marcus Sterling was exactly where he belonged. Part 5. Clear Streams 2 years later. Marcus stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, watching Rose tune her violin with the same careful precision she brought to everything. The black concert gown transformed her into someone luminous, but he could still see the woman who'd tended shelter gardens and served soup to strangers. 5 minutes, Ms. Chen," the stage manager whispered. Rose nodded, her fingers dancing across the strings in final preparation. The New York Philharmonic's guest soloist program had been her dream since childhood, and tonight, after 18 months of rigorous auditions and preparation, she would perform Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor for a sold-out audience. Marcus adjusted his simple black suit, a far cry from the designer armor he'd once worn to events. These days he preferred clothes that didn't announce his presence, that let him blend into the background where he'd learned to be most useful. "Nervous?" he asked Rose softly. She looked up at him, amber eyes bright with anticipation rather than fear. "Excited."
Ow.
"There's a difference. Your parents would be proud. They are proud." Rose's smile was gentle, free of the haunted quality it had carried when they first met. "I can feel them." Leonard Ashworth, the symphony's conductor, approached with the focused energy of a man who'd spent 40 years perfecting his craft. "Ms. Chen, are you ready to make history?" "I'm ready to make music," Rose replied. And Marcus heard the distinction clearly. The past 2 years had been a careful dance of healing and growth. Marcus had sold his penthouse and moved to a modest apartment near the shelter, where he now worked as full-time operations manager. Sterling Foundation, funded by his remaining assets, has provided microloans and scholarships to homeless individuals pursuing education or job training. Rose had been their first recipient. Using the money to pay for private lessons and audition fees, their relationship had developed with the same patient deliberation Rose brought to her music. Friendship first, built on shared work and mutual respect, then something deeper, acknowledged in small moments, hand-held during a difficult therapy session. A kiss shared in the shelter's garden under stars that seemed impossibly bright in the city. "Places, everyone," Leonard announced. Rose turned to Marcus, violin case in hand. "Will you be watching? Front row? Where I've been for every performance?" She stood on her toes to kiss him gently. "Thank you for everything. Thank you for seeing who I could become." The auditorium was packed, the energy electric. Marcus took his seat next to Gabriel Santos, who'd become an unlikely friend and mentor. Beside Gabriel sat Nina Caldwell, who'd left her position as Marcus's housekeeper too. Work as the shelter's head cook. She'd insisted on wearing her best dress to see her Rose perform. "You clean up nice," Gabriel murmured as the lights dimmed. "I had good teachers," Marcus replied. The orchestra began, and then Rose emerged from the wings. The spotlight caught her violin as she raised it, and for a moment, Marcus was transported back to that first night when she'd played in his penthouse. But this Rose was different, healed, whole, triumphant. The first notes soared through the concert hall, and Marcus felt tears he didn't try to hide. This was what music was meant to be, not background noise for parties or content for viral videos, but pure expression of the human soul. Rose's technique was flawless, but it was her emotion that transformed the familiar concerto into something transcendent. In the third movement, as Rose's violin sang its most complex passages, Marcus caught sight of a familiar figure in the balcony. Victoria Reeves, the journalist who'd first exposed his exploitation of Rose, was filming discreetly. But this time Marcus felt no anxiety. This story belonged to Rose, and she was telling it magnificently. The final notes faded into silence. So complete, it felt sacred. Then the applause erupted, a thunder of appreciation that brought the entire audience to its feet. Rose bowed gracefully, her face radiant with joy and accomplishment. Later, the reception, Marcus watched Rose navigate conversations with ease, her intelligence and warmth drawing people like moths to flame. She belonged in this world of culture and refinement, but she carried herself without pretension, remembering everyone's name and asking genuine questions about their lives. "Mr. Sterling?" A young woman approached, her press badge identifying her as Nora Blackwell from the Times. "I'm working on a follow-up piece about Ms. Chen's journey. Would you comment on your role in her comeback?" Marcus considered the question. "Carefully, I didn't help Rose make a comeback. She was never just overlooked. All I did was learn to get out of her way. But your foundation provided her scholarship. Our foundation provides opportunities. Rose provided the talent, the discipline, the courage to try again after the world had knocked her down." He glanced across the room where Rose was laughing with Leonard. She succeeded because she refused to let one mistake define her. "That's a lesson I'm still learning." Nora scribbled notes rapidly. "What's next for you both?" Rose has been invited to tour with the orchestra next season. "I'll be where I've always been, supporting her dreams and running our foundation." Marcus smiled. "We're also planning a wedding. When she's ready, we've learned that good things take time." As the reception wound down, Marcus and Rose found themselves on the steps of Carnegie Hall, the city alive around them. Rose still wore her concert gown, but she'd kicked off her heels and was carrying them, her feet bare on the cool stone. "Remember the first time we met?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. "How could I forget? I was such an ass. You were lost. There's a difference." Rose smiled up at him. "Besides, if you hadn't been an ass, we might never have found each other." They walked slowly toward the subway entrance where their story had begun. But now they were walking together as equals who'd found redemption in each other's brokenness. "Father, Miguel wants to marry us at the shelter," Rose said suddenly. Marcus stopped walking. Is that a proposal? It's a statement of intent. The proposal comes later when you're ready. I've been ready for months, I know, but I needed to do this. First, Rose gestured back toward Carnegie Hall. I needed to prove to myself that I could reclaim what I'd lost. And now I want to build something new. With you. Rose pulled out her phone and showed him a photo from earlier that evening. Two of them in the wings, Marcus adjusting her violin strap, while she smiled at something he'd said. Nora took this. She said it captured something beautiful. Marcus studied the image. It looked happy, peaceful, rooted in something deeper than passion or convenience. It looked like home. I love you, he said simply. I love you too. All of you, even the parts that made mistakes. They descended into the subway together. Rose's concert gown, a splash of elegance against the utilitarian tiles. A few passengers recognized her and offered congratulations. But most simply saw two people in love, riding the train toward whatever came next, at their stop. As they climbed toward street level, Marcus realized they were passing the exact spot where he'd first found Rose sleeping. The memory should have been painful, but instead it felt like a gifted reminder of how far they'd both traveled. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For forgiving me? For seeing who I could become? For teaching me that love isn't about possession or performance, it's about presence. Rose squeezed his hand. Thank you for learning how to be present. They emerged into the night air, the city sparkling around them like scattered diamonds. Tomorrow Marcus would return to the shelter, and Rose would begin preparing for her tour. But tonight, they were simply two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate storms and built something beautiful from the pieces. The water that had once been used to exploit had become the stream that carried them toward healing. And in learning to love each other, they discovered how to love themselves not for what they'd accomplished or overcome, but for the simple, profound act of showing up, day after day, for each other and for the world that had both broken and blessed them. Their story wasn't about redemption through grand gestures or viral moments. It was about the quiet miracle of two broken people choosing, again and again, to become whole.